Why do you think design is such a crucial part of how a story is told?
Storytelling isn't just words anymore, and I think that's where design comes in.
Many newsrooms feel that they're set with very rigid CMS systems.
All you can do is fill a template with content and use the blocks that are available in the CMS template. But there's always new ideas and always new formats. It's just a never-ending battle of updating.
Publishers today need to move fast, but they also really want to create high-quality content.
Bringing the reader into that discovery wall that you did while you as a journalist discovered the story. I think that it would only raise the bar of what the audience would perceive as good or authentic.
What do you think about AI? What are you guys building?
Starting point for a user that goes into Vev is to just describe what they want to build, and that AI builds the layout, but they start from 80% done instead of from scratch.
I'm speaking with Tine Karlsen, CEO and co-founder of Vev. Vev is an interactive experience builders that give designers, marketers, and developers a no-code solution to create content and websites with full creative freedom. In this episode, we talk about storytelling, design, and how publishers can break free from rigid CMS systems. Stay tuned. When we talk about storytelling in journalism, we do often focus on content, but do we rarely focus on how it's presented? Why do you think design is such a crucial part of how a story is told?
Oh, gosh, straight on that, yeah. Storytelling isn't just words anymore. I think that the multimedia world has given us the opportunity to use a lot of more formats, and I think that's where design comes in.
For those that don't know you and Vev, who are you and what does actually Vev do?
Yeah, so I'm Tina. I'm CEO and co-founder of Vev. I'm 33 years old. Yeah, that sounds correct. So I have one daughter, one on the way. So if it sounds like I'm like struggling breathing, I actually am. I have a full-grown baby in my stomach. But yeah, so we founded Vev back in 2017. Me and my co-founder, Nikolai, the tech guy. My passion lies in strategy and business development. And when we go back to what Vev is, it's an interactive experience builder, you could call it, a web builder that offers designers, marketers, and developers a no-code solution to building both sites and content for the web with full creative freedom.
It's pretty impressive, and I will make sure that you get to do breathing in this conversation and everything is under control. You work with some of the really big media brands today and also advertisers overall. What do you think they often get wrong about design or storytelling?
Well, I'm not that involved in judging the design or the storytelling tactics, but the one thing that I can think of that I think is done wrong is not hiring creative resources in-house. So basically stifling creativity and the opportunity to execute on ideas. I think is the biggest mistake as of today.
And if you just rewind a little bit, how did you end up building a company focused on storytelling, no code, as you mentioned? Was there a moment you just said, this has to change, there must be a better solution out there?
I wish I had that aha moment, but actually it's sort of a long story. So I haven't had an actual like real job out of startups. When I was studying, I studied business development and creativity and innovation. And I landed a job as a business developer for a company that said that they wanted to make, what was it, like the 7-Eleven for online 7-Eleven for digital magazines. So what they wanted to do is that they wanted to enable publishers to digitize their print versions and sell the print versions online. And at that time, the media industry was in a crisis, so print publications were dropping. They were giving away news for free online. And as a business developer there, I ended up seeing the big difference between how a print magazine was produced versus a digital one. So you had, like in the past, you would put a lot of resources into daily, weekly, or monthly publications, a lot of thought into the design and the look. But then it was quickly replaced by the web, where you have CMS systems that you use for building the articles and the look and feel of your site. And those are totally different in the way that they work. You have CMSs that just offer static templates that you have to use. And if you want to go outside of the template, it requires hard coding and developers getting involved. So the purest form of the idea behind Vev is basically allowing for a creative process similar to producing for print or prototyping into producing for the web. But from there, the idea of Vev has evolved drastically. So of course, there's more to it than just the design process. But I think that's the purest form of the idea and the task that we set out to solve.
I love that thought, and maybe taking it back on some of the things that they mastered with print, maybe got lost a little bit in digital. We're going to come into that. And for people and listeners that's been listening to, they know I love analogies. And I think very often if the content is definitely king, but maybe design is the stage it performs on, if you think about it. And you need basically also the stage. But do you think people trust beautiful design content more than poorly designed content, even if the message is the same? Think about articles going out with a punchy headline, but same article format. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, of course. And the research that I've been diving into often connects to the results that interactive content generates. But also when you think of interactive content, there has been a lot of design thought put into that. There's also branding involved, that sort of thing. And it is proven that you see more engagement, you see more click-through rates, you see that the content performs better when it comes to engaging, educating, influencing. So whatever you want to achieve, design plays a part in that.
I think one thing is that as humans as well, we're drawn to aesthetics. It's just simple how we are as humans. Why do you think that's matter when we're talking about like serious content, like we see in the news, financial stories, what it be? Yeah.
I think that if you want to be taken serious, you have to also look and play the part. So I do think that we have like two directions. We have like the moth attracted to the flame, or humans stopping and watching traffic accidents. That's like one design path that you could take. And then the other is about staying true to your brand and who you are as a publisher, being and presenting someone that is showcasing reality as it is. I think that design plays a part in what positioning you take as a publisher.
Let's talk about also a balancing act that I find speaking with publishers on a daily level. I mean, publishers today need to move fast, but they also really want to create high quality content. How do you make sort of both speed and what we talked about, aesthetic, beautiful content possible at once? I mean, there's scarce resources, there's other things. What do you think?
So on one hand, you have the CMS with the templates, where it's plug and play. You put in the content and press publish, and it's ready to go. That's, of course, the crucial part of the tech stack for a publisher. So But if you want to connect that to creativity and being able to customize, that's where Vev plays a role. Because you don't have to choose between either or. Vev plugs into the CMS. So in Vev, you can build templates and libraries that are styled the way you want with your branding. But you also have the opportunity to go rogue, basically, and design whatever you want or mix the two approaches. So for a publisher's tech stack, you should have the reusable plug-and-play system that you have in your CMS system, and then complement it with a more flexible tool like Vev.
How much do you think design in media today is, how should I say, strategic versus reactive? I mean, publishers are they using design to build long-term trust, or for me, it's also we are part of this. We build, for example, in Kilkaya, personalization for AI to then drive clicks, meaningful clicks, but is it mostly chasing clicks? Where do you see the design playing a role there?
I see both tactics with our customers. So I've had some deep conversations where Vev has played a part in perfectioning everything. So making everything pixel perfect and really nerding about the look and feel down to the smallest detail. But also the other approach where you're experimenting more and just tracking engagement, only like looking at the immediate result. And I actually don't want to judge either tactic because you learn something from both. And the interesting part is that I've seen reports on good results on on both tactics, which I find a bit interesting. And there's also like my role in this is providing a technology that allows you to experiment or nerd about the tiny pixel details. So what works is also different for different publishers because they have different target audiences as well, which I think plays a big part into the reactive versus strategic angle as well.
I mean, it's clearly, I just came back from Stockholm from the Media Summit, which was extremely exciting too. And we learned quite a bit in terms of reading habits, and reading habits has changed. You talked about like the design, how it played a role in how you got the physical paper. The magazine is beautiful. You see the time is put in, but we now know that reading behavior has changed. There's shorter attention spans. It's mobile first. TikTok generation are getting their news there in social media. How do you think publishers needs to respond to that and the design that comes into that?
So what we offer and the way that we think is the best way to adapt is that you can actually create different experiences on different devices. So you also have to adapt to what platform the reader comes from. I think you can offer one version of a story on desktop and even another simplified version on mobile. And I also think that you can reuse content in different ways. So you could serve like shorter, snappier, more swipeable stories on mobile, and even allow for the reader to know that they can take more of a deep dive on their desktop if they want.
One of the learnings that I heard from the Media Summit, which was talking about, for example, TikTok, how important it was with like the hook, but then animations and then feeling that you're part of then the content itself. And I know in Vev, and this is something I just read on your pages. I'm quite interested into the term, but I never heard it before. So you have storytelling, but you guys seem to invent something called scrollytelling, if I pronounce it correctly. For those that don't know this term, what is it and how does it work?
I don't think we invented it. I think the first case of it that I saw back when I started Vev was New York Times Snowfall, which I then also learned that they spent a lot of money on building, which is very, I think a fool would understand that the media industry can't like put that type of resources into every story. But scrollytelling is a storytelling technique where you use visuals, animations, video, sound that triggers as the reader scrolls through the page. So the goal is to make the narrative more engaging and interactive. You can think of it as like turning a website into a mini documentary, basically, where scrolling triggers the movement, the transitions, and helps you bring the story to life.
I also been in a part where I had my time in my life where I loved putting in animation in PowerPoint and so on, but sometimes you say that it just camouflages the message and it's not really the great. When does it just become noise, sort of? How do you know when animation effects just, does it enhance the story or is this distracting? I find this one quite interesting. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think it's that difficult, but I do think that it takes like creative understanding, because you have to use interactivity or animations intentionally. If an animation helps explain something more clearly or emphasize now we're trying to communicate an important point, or this is a number that should stand out to you, or where the interaction supports the narrative versus interrupting it. So I think that it takes a lot of work from the creator's point of view into, even when you shape the beginning of the story, to try and figure out what stands out to you, what you want to highlight. And that's the instructions that you should give to the designer of what are the important points to highlight here. And how could we do that? What content do we have available to emphasize what you're trying to get the reader to understand, or where you want the reader to pause or continue?
Do you think that maybe we are at times, especially with news publishers, trying to at times mimic social media a little bit too much, or are these formats actually helping us tell the stories better? I think there's also a difference between then what you're talking about, but then I see sometimes the mimicking of things that are happening on storytelling, but you must have thoughts on this.
Are you thinking of like all news should be communicated in like a snappy, fast, swipeable way?
Not necessarily, but I see more of it definitely coming, where they're testing out these formats, and I don't think it's wrong to do these different formats, and it's absolutely fine. But I think maybe it's then mimicking it a little bit too much, and then is that then going beyond actually the good case telling the story in this case, or is it enhancing it? You must see maybe with your clients then asking more about this, or any thoughts related to it.
Yeah, because where I see it, like the power of social media, a lot of our lives are happening on social media, and a lot of the stories that you talk about are also like being unveiled on social media. So I would rather think of it as publishers could reuse the content in different ways and use that content to help tell the story of what has happened. Like the fast visual swipeable content should invite the reader into wanting to know more. Whereas the juicy details you actually have to read, because you can't tell everything in those short attention spans that social media offers. But I was actually thinking about the Tinder Swindler even.
I think for you have to tell here, because I find that one of the best stories ever made, but maybe for the listeners who doesn't know about it.
Yeah, I'm like seeing it as, if you could, if you see, I have this image in my head of investigative journalism. you know, in the movies, they have this wall where they put all the pictures, they connect all the dots, you have surveillance videos, that sort of thing. And at the end of the series, you have the journalist writing this kick-ass story, but it's only writing. But now with the multimedia format that we have available, if we choose the right technology, you could invite the reader into the character's world, or you could think of it as bringing the reader into that discovery wall that you did while you as a journalist discovered the story. So that's where I think the multimedia approach makes sense, where you, like, these are the characters. These are actually like the formats that the reader can know intuitively. So you don't like mimic social media, but you harness the content to tell the story in the right way.
I absolutely agree. And I'll go just a little bit with my narrative of then asking the question, because so using myself as an example, when I was growing up, of course I had television and so on, but my family wanted to reduce the amount of television, and rather instead I got to pick out every book I wanted. So I spent a lot of time reading books, which helped my brain to sort of visualize the story more and more for myself. But as generations passed, we got more multimedia. The muscle of then imagining these things, I think, has maybe gone down a little bit, because we have all of these available formats to then see things visual. I might think also the generation that is younger wants more of that engaging with it. I think this is one of the bigger priorities maybe for news publishers, is how do you engage with your audience. And you mentioned there, for example, investigative journalism, which is one part of what news provides today. We talk in the industry about user needs. Give me inspiration, give me something, connect me with a story, update me. I think that storytelling really can enhance specific parts of content. I wanted to have an example here, because you mentioned the Tinder Swindler, and just for the listeners on this, Tinder Swindler became a Netflix sensation, but before this is then a story of a guy who then basically made up a story of being rich and then fooled a lot of women in it. It's a really powerful story that was then featured at VG and Schibsted in that. But then I find that it turns in the scrollytelling that you talk about, but just tell the listeners a little bit of how that case was presented, because I think maybe design really makes a difference in investigative journalists to imagine the case itself.
Yeah, so the characters involved in the story has documented everything on their phones with screenshots of their stories, of how the Tinder Swindler presented himself on social media and on Tinder. So you have these incredible amounts of content where you can show how the characters experienced what happened in real life. And then the journalist used that in the article to tell the story, where you narrate what happened, but also prove it in a way with showcasing screenshots, also having videos of the jet set lifestyle that they had with this guy. And I think that just makes the story more real than if the journalist decided to put it into the regular CMS format with a picture of a guy at the top. So it's like simple. It takes resources to like showcase a story that way, but the technology that you have available makes that possible, and also at scale. And the tactics that they used for that article can be reused in other stories.
Let's talk a little bit about now how the system's being used for in news in this case. And you talked here about what's the blocker of better storytelling. And you mentioned here the CMS, which is content management system, which most publishers are using today. Having worked with CMSs as well, it does a lot of understanding the workflows at the news desk, making it easier to then produce the articles. But let's not fool ourselves. Once it's set, you are very much locked into that specific way of doing things. And there might be the cases here, for example, you mentioned there were Tinder Swindler, where we need something a little bit different. I think most publishers are stuck a little bit with rigid CMS systems, which one, maybe don't allow them to scale for the future with all the different formats and multimedia you have. Well, why do you think there are barriers for innovation? What do you guys see and what's the feedback you hear?
So exactly what you said, the CMS, the intention for CMS is to set one system that allows for mass publishing. So that you can...
One ring to rule them all.
Yeah. So that you can invite in a lot of content creators, editors that can't make mistakes, basically. So all you can do is fill a template with content and use the blocks that are available in the CMS template. And to edit the CMS template, you need developers. And because that takes, of course, you can do tweaks, but usually you have demands from all sorts of departments. You have marketing, you have the journalists in the publisher segment, all having different wants and needs. So you typically end up with a never-ending request list for tweaking. And then you always end up with compromising on ideas. So the developer says what is possible in the CMS template is this is the max. So then you have to adapt all ideas to whatever new template you have. But there's always new ideas and always new formats and always new things that you want to do. So it's just a never-ending battle of updating. And then you make these huge projects where you say, oh, it's time to redesign everything. So then you have projects for millions of kroners or even dollars to redesign everything, and then you just start the rhythm back again.
I think actually some of the listeners will know this, and when you talk about tweaks, I mean, just a tweak on changing a block, anything, can be involving a lot of developers, maybe outside partners, and I think really one of the things that is important these days is speed, because things are changing so rapidly. So you explained Vev as a no-code platform. I mean, it's self-explanatory, but for people that hasn't heard about it, what does it really mean, and why does it matter for publishers and creators?
So it means that you can visually design in the purest form, yes, a website, but a website can be anything. It can be an article, a blog post, a content block, and you design that visually. And of course, you have no-code builders that are pretty basic, and then you have the more advanced. At Vev, we try to mix the two. So you can have a designer that has built a set of templates or libraries that the content creators can choose from and build with, but with limited design opportunities. And then you have a free roaming design tool where designers can build whatever they vision, because you have both building blocks such as like slideshows and videos, background videos and such, but you also have animation tools and interaction tools that allows the designer to build the logic and flow that they want.
So I guess if you want to do then experimentation, having a no-code solution allows you to do that versus a CMS where you're more locked in this case. And what's the expression? Maybe you separate sort of the front end from the back end in a bigger degree in this case.
Yeah, we see Vev as an extension to the CMS. Because what you also monitor and use the CMS for is like how you publish, security. You can manage accessibility, tracking, all of those things. So Vev connects to the CMS. So you just build the visual part. You publish into your CMS so that you get the benefits of what your tech team has spent a lot of time and resources on building.
But then, I mean, you thinking of a little bit of the tech teams, and when I speak about it, so one thing is of course the front end of this, and you say extension, but there's more things that the tech team thinks about, maybe security, integration, control, at least from the CMS. I mean, you probably meet the skepticism. I mean, how do you then face that?
Yeah, because everyone is used to thinking about no-code tools as like a third-party tool that typically the marketing department buys to be able to do what they want without impacting the roadmap or intentions of the tech team. We built Vev a bit differently, where yes, the front end and the design is built in Vev, but the publishing flow allows you to publish into your CMS. So you can also add it to like the desking and approval system that you have in your CMS before something goes out live, for example. And when you then publish in that way, then your analytics tools kicks in, your security settings kicks in. The only thing that you might have to think about is in the design process is accessibility. A lot of the accessibility features are built into Vev from the get-go. But of course, the designer can put a light blue header on a light blue picture. So that responsibility is up to the designer. But the rest that in the past has caused skepticism from developers is pretty much solved with Vev and the way that we publish and connect to the tech stack that's already there.
There's also a lot of changes that have been happening, I would say 5-10 years in terms of also revenue related to news publishers. The rise of subscription, where clearly we talked about seeing how design can be made to then visualize a story even better. But before this, we had advertising as one of the key parts. And having been a pragmatic buyer myself, worked at WPP, where it was done, you got a not so decent banner, which takes you to a landing page and so on. I think also one change that I've seen is that advertisers require, or they want more and better, and see the rule that design makes for them. And I see also content marketing changing quite dramatically and going into, if you were to then, let's say, you're a news publisher, you make an agreement with a car brand, Volvo, let's say that. And if you then want to then tweak that in the CMS format to then tell a story, again, the visualization, it doesn't become, do you see a change also in like how this can help, for example, content marketing, how advertising teams are using no code today to produce better, more aesthetic, beautiful content?
Yeah, so when we work with publishers, you have the editorial department, you have the marketing department that works on promoting their own subscriptions and products. And then you have the brand studios that build content marketing on behalf of advertisers. I think that's where Vev actually gets to shine the most, because every time you onboard a new advertiser, you have to build a new template, or some uses that tactic where they offer customized content for their advertisers. So then they use Vev to craft a template that is branded, for example, for a car brand, but in the spirit of the publication. We also see different products being produced where you have templates that are more or less customized to the brand. So the publisher has one template in Vev where they can change colors, fonts, pictures, logos, and that's like their core product, off-the-shelf production. But then you also have those who have designers that are able to create fully custom experiences for the advertiser. For example, Schibsted Partner Studio. I think there's a story for IKEA about tidying up different rooms. So in the story, you would choose if you live with or without children, and then you choose what room you want to tidy up. Then you get presented with a messy living room, and then you get to see a tidy living room with IKEA products, for example. So it's fully custom built. And IKEA could do this on their own website, but they, of course, want to use the distribution power from a publisher. But in this way, they get to make their own brand shine as well. But then I also know other brand studios that only offer templates that are more adapted to the publisher's look and feel, where they're only allowed to change out images, for example. And when we see the results, both tactics work, but I actually don't have insight to what tactic works the most. But it also depends on what brands you want to sell advertising to.
So listeners, if you do have data on that, come back to Tine and let her know for that. But then I think I think you're onto something here in terms of you want the flexibility to create these specific ways of how to present the story. And it's also, people come to these news brands because of the trust. I say trust is new currency in news media and journalism overall. And then if you can also make it look like it's part of almost an article you will read naturally, then you already have audience that would then take a really look into the greatness of advertiser like a car brand or the others that want to do this. I want to move into something is top of everybody's mind in this space, and that's definitely AI and the use of it. And I found it was great here the other day, tried ChatGPT and how great it's become to create images. I think I even created a logo for it for a co-event that we did now in Stockholm, which it looked great. Managed to make a Viking helmet, a name, put in the logos. Really, really cool stuff. And now that AI can generate text, images, and even code, what does that mean for design? And do you see that playing a role in terms of the importance of having good in-house designers when you can create this at speed?
Definitely. I think that it would only raise the bar of what the audience would perceive as good or authentic, basically. So yeah,
it is getting pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, it is getting pretty good. So I'm thinking that in any project, in anything that you want to do, the first 80% is quite simple, and then 20% is like magic or art. So I'm thinking that AI is a tool that will get you like 80% there. And then the rest is human creativity or intuition that you need to add to the projects.
I see it as even making these different podcasts. I use a tool which can then basically AI generate a lot of the content for me. But you say that 20%, it's pretty good. It gets me to 95, but I still think that by me going in doing it, the 5% does matter. And it's about something that gets the attention. It's probably going to get great, but I still think those 5, 10, 20%, it really, really does matter. But the speed at which AI is moving and the possibilities is just going so fast. So where do you see it's fitting in terms of for newsrooms and news in terms of fitting into the content creation and design workflows that they're doing today?
I think first drafts of even like an article in Vev is a good place to start. You have accessibility, so having AI help you monitor that you're actually building accessible design. like there's 100 things. There's localization, so translating a page into several languages. You have summarizing. Like the list is endless. So I think that using AI as a productivity tool for things that we would plunder with ourselves before is the trick. But then I think humans should use it in a way that helps them out for productivity, without taking away what's fun, which is the creative part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I use, for example, transcription here to then be able to have subtitles for these videos. Last episode I had, which was with Lars Adrian Giskus, the head of AI at Tromsø, which built a tool called Gin. And it's great having something translate the subtitles, but the amount of times it said to drink gin versus gin was a lot of edits for me. So that caused a little bit of issues in that case.
Yeah.
But then there's the different elements here. So what are you building in terms of AI, and are you having tools that you said to summarize, local, auto design, or generate assets? What do you think about AI? What are you guys building?
There's a bunch of hidden AI features in Vev, like meta tags on pictures and just things that you would have to remember fixing yourself. There's also a tool to create summaries of articles that you've made in Vev. You can translate. You have like the normal text editing tools where you can use it to prototype something without having to have full text. So you could write Mercedes-Benz and it will generate text about Mercedes-Benz for your template and for your pitch. But we've actually been holding back a little bit on AI features. We have a lot on the plan. But what we've seen is that the tools that are built to create websites with the AI typically need a developer's touch to go live. And the whole point with Vev is that you produce production-ready content without a developer's touch. So that also requires, like, you have to be able to implement your brand and have rules and this and that. So we haven't launched anything yet, but there's more coming where we're thinking about Vev as, what can I say, like your AI assistant to get started based on your brand and your library, for AI to give you suggestions. I think accessibility is really important for our segment, enterprises. But where we need to nail it is that if you create something in Vev, it has to be ready to go live, not go to a developer review, basically.
I think that will take a lot of time as well, and maybe we talked about speed, but then we talked about it, but I just really want to hear it like clearly in this case. I mean, AI can do a lot of the basic and be sort of this assistant. Why will still design and human creativity still matter?
Yeah, I think that anytime something becomes more accessible, like, for example, making good design for the web, then the professionals will be even more important because the expectation bar from readers and consumers will increase as well. And there's one thing that we keep forgetting about, and it's like art, basically, where it's that like hidden magic touch that you can't really describe, that I think is where humans will play a part. And you also need someone to instruct the AI on what we're trying to achieve. And I think it's interesting to see who's able to adopt AI and understand how it works versus those who aren't able to actually use it and execute a task with the AI. So like the citizen developer term, like AI developer term will probably evolve as well. But to be able to talk efficiently with these solutions, you need to have the experience to how to instruct an AI properly. Because to prompt an idea is probably more difficult than to draw it. So what we've seen is that the tools that allows you to prompt a website are now adding visual builders as like the second step, because you get exhausted for trying to explain small ideas to an AI. Where we've taken the opposite approach, we have the really powerful visual tools and the scalability tools, and that we can use AI as a tool to get you almost where you want to go, but then it's limitless with the visual tools as well.
Let's zoom out a little bit, and you talked into sort of the future. It's crazy to say fast forward 5-10 years, but maybe just 2 years is a good time frame where the things are changing. What will storytelling look like for news publishers, and what's changing, what most people haven't realized yet?
Like I don't have a crystal ball, and I think the interesting part about trends is that you could say that now with scrollytelling, the next trend will be to only have text. Like who knows what will take off. Where my focus lies is that I've built Vev in such a way that if you decide to go with Vev, you can trust that any trend or development will be possible within the tool. So I think like that is where my approach comes in, where we've built a very flexible solution that can implement new exciting tools faster than others. But when it comes to storytelling, I think the trick is also in how the organizations within publishers evolve. What type of resources publishers decide to hire. And I think that there is this surge of both publishers and companies hiring more in-house creative people that can actually help them use the tools efficiently and make scalable workflows for the rest of us without creative or technical powers.
I think workflows is important here, and then I mean one of the natural things here is then how publisher thinks about how the workflows will change, what people they put in, and I keep on saying, I mention him too many times, Pitbull, Mr. 305, is there's a trend here, there's a trend here, but then you have long vision, small steps to then get there, and I think it's important to keep that in mind. You've seen a lot of experiments, some work, some don't, with how publishers use no-code solution. Like Vev, you mentioned like the great investigative journalism era with the Tinder Swindler from Schibsted and VG. What do the best publishers do right about design, the culture, and experimentation when they use tools like Vev?
They implement fusion teams, I would say, is like the most important. In some companies, that would be marketers, designers, developers. For publishers, that would include journalists. So what they do right is that they actually equip their teams with the resources to execute well. And I think another part of it is whatever it's not only true for Vev, it's probably for any tool you use. I think that it's very easy to buy a tool and use 20% of its capabilities. So I also think for culture and managing workflows, you need someone to stay on top of what we mentioned, workflows, actually using the tools to the full extent.
Do you think in teams today, I mean, with the CMS structures, you set very clear workflows and then, okay, you write the story, it goes out, it has the set format. Do you think publishers are open to the idea to then change this quickly? And I would guess like a tool like Vev allows them to then rethink a little bit how they set up the teams. But just as an example, like from you sort of idea phase, how does the different teams look in terms of using a tool like Vev to then thinking of the idea, writing it, and then implementing Vev? Just a couple of thoughts there.
It becomes more of a collaborative process where the process starts in the content creation phase, or where you collect resources that you can use. So the Fusion teams, of course, requires some sort of leader. I think a journalist is a good role there in like figuring out the story, but they should be supported by a team that can help execution, whether that is content creation or design or development or all the above. I think that's the trick to get really good results on the web today. From my point of view, Vev is that platform that allows this collaborative workflow that invites all key players into the process. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's also maybe getting them the time to do the other work that maybe is done maintenance and other things that comes into it. And it really allows for the teams to be, I think it's about being dynamic and being able to change workflows, how they work today to then cater to the different needs. Tina, just on a personal note, what keeps you going? I mean, you said you're 33, you have this company, you're now becoming a mom for the second time here. What keeps you going? What's the mission that drives you in this space?
Oh, it's so cheesy. So we are basically aiming to build the last web creation platform for front-end design ever needed. So that keeps me going because it's a huge vision. But the cool part is that with the team that I work with, my co-founder and the tech team, I'm seeing it actually happening, which is incredibly exciting, where we are able to serve what we've been talking about today, the media industry and publishers, which I think is the use case where you have like the biggest volume of custom content being produced. We have customers that produce several thousand custom articles per year. But then I'm also seeing the impact that it's making on normal businesses like Pfizer and Syngenta, Red Bull, that are looking to Vev to change the way that they build front end overall. So they are separating the back end from the front end and using Vev to be, they're actually 90% more productive on the front end creation than compared to traditional solutions. So I'm seeing Vev playing a part in changing how we build front end today. And seeing the potential of that growing big, I think, is what drives me on a regular basis.
I guess also learning, I mean, talking about media and publishing at the scale it has and then the amount of learning you can take out from the different pieces and keep on changing. I think, for example, about just to use myself an example, doing this podcast, I might be doing different formats. I'm trying to learn constantly what works better or not. I think it's the scale also that it offers to constantly maybe setting your strategy towards one way of then presenting content. We don't live in that world where it's done the one printed magazine. It's change happening yesterday, today, tomorrow, allowing teams to then change this quickly without having too much, let's just be honest, tech debt that maybe some systems allows is maybe, I think that's a great vision, and a great motivation. Tina, we have a closing tradition in this podcast, Inside Shapes News, that the previous guest gets to leave a question for the new one. The previous guest, we mentioned him, is Lars Adrian Giske, who's the head of AI at Tromsø, which is owned by Polaris Media, which built Gin, which is then a tool that understands basically the newsworthiness of big archives of municipality documents, a great use case. And it's an AI question. If you could do anything you ever wanted with AI, what would it be? Full freedom, could be in media publishing, can be your own life, it can be anything. You completely open.
Well, it's like we've been talking about it, like what we're trying to do with AI is what I really want to do with AI. So I want the initial starting point for a user that goes into Vev is to just describe what they want to build. Like a landing page for a spring campaign targeting Gen Z, I don't know. And that AI builds the layout, but where you can also say, I work for, let's say, Red Bull. So it takes that into account in the production process. But then designers can still tweak and adapt the creative vision, but they start from 80% done instead of from scratch. So that's what we're aiming to build and what I want to see in reality, just like I envision it in my head.
Fantastic. And looking forward for next time we talk to them, maybe see this in the future as well. You get to leave a question for the next guest, not knowing who that person is. It's definitely somebody in media and publishing and so on. Can be quite open in terms of, do you have a question that you want me to ask the next guest?
I think that I'm interested in what they think the workforce for publishers will look like in the future. So what resources publishers have to hire to adapt to the future.
Any specific parts, like journalism, tech, or just an overall picture?
Overall picture.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Looking forward to then asking that for the next guest. Hey, Tina, this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate your time on this. And I think you pointed out on something, not just, I think for the future of news and publishing is both being able to scale, speed, but then I think generations want different ways of visualizing. I was lucky to have books in my when I was young to visualize myself, but also now with other generation wanting to visualize, being part of that. We're talking constantly about building relationship with the audience. I definitely think that this is one of the things there. So I really appreciate your insights and your time. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant.